I have a wish.
صدای دورتون بگردم که انقدر قشنگ.
برای همچین آدمی خیلی معنی میده بره تو مرد سیگنال اون بالا بشینه.
Since then, we've been through many changes.
What are you so afraid of?
Not you.
And one thing that put us through those changes was carnal knowledge.
First Cindy. Oh, no, not Cindy. How about Sandy? How about Cindy and Sandy?
Letting the genie out of the bottle, a sprawling family saga from Iran, and Mike Nichols' modern classics back on the big screen. That's all coming up in today's film show. And for that, I'm joined by critic Lisa Nesselson. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Olivia.
Now, we're starting with a film coming out late August in France and in the US. It comes from George Miller. It's called 3,000 Years of Longing, and it stars Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba. You would think it would be hard to make a bad film with that cast. You saw it when it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in May. What did you think of it?
Well, I think 3,000 years is an acceptable time frame for a narrative arc, so long as the movie itself doesn't feel as if it lasts that long. And we're in luck here because the director is Australia's George Miller, who brought us the Mad Max films and their polar opposite, Babe. Miller and his daughter adapted this from a story by A.S. Byatt called The Djinn in the Nightingale's Eye. While it's peppered with visual fantasy, it remains fairly cerebral. Swinton plays Alethea Binney. And I'd just like to take time to say that it would have taken me about 3,000 years to forgive my parents had they named me Alethea Binney, an esteemed scholar who is content living and traveling on her own. She buys a souvenir in Istanbul, which turns out to contain a djinn, what most of us would call a genie, who offers Alethea 3 wishes in exchange for his freedom. Alethea is a narratologist who tells stories about stories. And telling us that is roughly the equivalent of showing a gun at the start of a movie we expect it to be used at some point. Well, sure enough, stories about stories are in ample supply.
Okay, well, this is an epic tale, although it mostly takes place in a hotel room in Istanbul, a room that happily is big enough to accommodate that rather large djinn. Let's take a look.
There's no story about wishing that is not a cautionary tale.
We all have desires, even if they remain hidden from us. But it is your story, and I cannot wait to see where it goes.
Oh, how it might end. Hello. He'll be staying for a while.
So apparently this was a real passion project for the director, but he might have wished that it got a better reception at the festival. It got quite mixed reviews, I believe.
It did. This is a strange, visually splendid tale about patience and the passing of time and being careful what you wish for. It both celebrates and makes fun of approaching everything with logic and reason. After all, if you buy a misshapen glass bottle thingy in the Grand Bazaar because you like the way it looks, and it turns out to have an individual inside who learns your language in a jiffy, there is no point in saying clearly this cannot be happening because it is not possible. It's rather silly, and yet the artistry of those 2 leads goes a long way. Not 3,000 years worth, though. It's interesting rather than captivating much of the time, admirable rather than enthralling. Now, we shouldn't keep things bottled up, and if it's true, we all have a kindred spirit out there somewhere. Does that point to companionship or something lustier? This is a nice try with some visually impressive components, but not as satisfying as I would have, wished.
Didn't grant your wishes there. Now, we've got another film also due out here in France later this summer. It's the Iranian drama Layla's Brothers, written and directed by a director, Saeed Roustayi, who's only 32 years old. I loved this. I believe you're a fan as well.
Oh, yeah. There were 21 films competing for the Golden Palm at the Cannes Film Festival in May. This would have been my choice for the top award. The jury didn't agree with me. I've seen it twice, and the almost 3 hours just fly by both times. This is a gripping, brilliantly layered story of a poor Tehran family who manage not to answer the door every time opportunity knocks. This film just kept sideswiping me with unforeseen developments. I'd be marveling, oh no, did that just happen? Followed by, a while later by, wait, not That, come on, you got to be kidding me, building toward that's what's going on? Egads. The cranky, illiterate patriarch lives in a ramshackle house in a crummy neighborhood with his put-upon wife and their adult children. Layla, the smartest of the bunch, but bummer, a woman in a patriarchal society, and 4 sons. Now, Layla's job in an office at a prosperous mall is the only steady income. The oldest brother works as an attendant in the mall's restrooms. And odd as it sounds, a public toilet just may be the family's one chance at escaping poverty and the precariousness that accompanies it.
It's full of those kind of strange small details and then family saga style sprawling scope like a 19th century novel from Russia or France. Well, let's take a look at Layla's brothers.
لیلا این چه کاریه آبجیم آبرو نمیمونه برامون عقب مونده یه علاف گدا فقط مال یه دقیقتونه
چیکار کنم حالمون خوب بشه
لیلا
برام یه آبجی بیار که بزرگتر باشه بشه بهش تکیه کرد.
This film has absolutely everything. A dazzling, action-packed beginning, suspense to burn, family dynamics you would not wish on your worst enemy, bad decisions that will have you gasping when you learn just how bad they really were, and it's all wrapped in geopolitical reality. This director, who's underseen just 6.5, released in France last year as La Loi de Téhéran and a sleeper hit, was an absolutely riveting portrait of drug addicts, drug dealers, and cops in Tehran. He's so talented, I can barely sit still when I talk about him. You heard it here first. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and you will almost certainly get the short end of the stick if you're not only poor, but female.
It is indeed a biting commentary of Iranian society, and it's worth pointing out that in late June, the head of the Ministry of Culture and Islamic Guidance there said that film was officially banned, ostensibly because it had been screened in Cannes without government approval. So, Now, onto a director who had an outstanding track record on stage and screen until his death in 2014, and he was aged 83, Mike Nichols. 2 of his movies have been restored. They're going to be out here in France. One of them's Carnal Knowledge. Tell us a bit more about that film and the man who made it.
Well, as France commemorates this summer the roundups and deportations of French Jews 80 years ago, it's sobering to think how many European Jews who became the creative backbone of Hollywood could have been victims of the Nazi extermination machine had they not left Europe in time. Igor Mikhail Pershovsky, known to us as Mike Nichols, left Berlin for the U.S. in April of 1939 when he was 7 years old. And that's why we've been privileged to enjoy his satirical stand-up routines with the great Elaine May, his legendary stage work, and his films such as Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and The Graduate. Carnal Knowledge has always been a fascinating portrait of the American male psyche penned by the cartoonist Jules Feiffer. But boy, is it interesting a half-century later as we revise our ideas about what is and isn't acceptable for a man to do in his pursuit of female companionship and what women should tolerate while being pursued. It spans the 1940s to the early 1970s, following the sex lives of 2 college roommates played by Jack Nicholson and Art Garfunkel.
Oh, 2 names that went on to be quite well known. Well, here's a glimpse of Carnal Knowledge.
Women judge you very quickly. I don't want to get in over my head. I got in over my head to be in. You have to be a real bastard. We'd be good together.
I'm dating your best friend.
I think you can make out with her.
Think so?
He won't mind.
Sometimes I think I'm a better friend to you than you are to me.
Now, incredibly, except for Mike Nichols, the director, the cast are still with us. Jack Nicholson, Art Garfunkel, who at the time was known mostly for his successful folk duo with Paul Simon, Candice Bergen, Anne Margaret, even Rita Moreno. The Day of the Dolphin is also being re-released in France, adapted from a Cold War satire by French author Robert Merle. The film involves the kidnapping of trained-to-talk dolphins with an eye toward a political assassination. It's science fiction.
Definitely sounds worth checking out. Now we're wrapping up the show with another underwater creature. In a way, let's say, an exhibition on this summer here in Paris, which takes a look back at the films of Jean Painlevé. He's not that well known outside of France. Tell us a bit more about him.
Well, Jean-Paul Levy, who was born in 1902 and died in 1989, saw the potential immediately for recording aquatic and other life forms on film. Seahorses, octopus, vampire bats. This isn't an art museum because it's scientific, it's historical, and it's unquestionably art. Pan Levy's animal documentaries illuminated the 20th century with their scientific rigor, and today still musicians just love to write scores for his arresting silent films. Probably his most famous film is Seahorses from the early 1930s, in which he discovered that it's the female who has her way with the male and makes him carry the eggs in his pouch, which unbalances him. The vampire shows a scary bat sucking the blood from a helpless rodent. Set to music by Duke Ellington, it's a sly anti-fascist work. Pan Levy loved filming octopus and also liquid crystals. The show spotlights Pan Levy's companion, Geneviève Amon, an essential collaborator who had merchandising ideas like wallpaper and jewelry inspired by the seahorse imagery they captured. She also invented a way to stabilize the camera. Pan Levy's 200 films definitely live on.
Sounds truly timeless indeed. Lisa, thank you very much for that roundup of those movies, and that fascinating art-nature hybrid show is on at the Jeu de Paume Photography Museum here in Paris. We'll leave you with a look at some of Jean-Paul Levy's underwater scenes. Do remember you can get more movie news on our website. We're on social media too. There's more news coming up on France 24 just after this.